So thank you all so much for joining us for best-selling author Alison Gaylin, who will discuss her new thriller, We Are Watching, in this installment of Author Hour in Massachusetts. So Alison is the USA Today and international best-selling author of 13 books, including the standalones The Collective and If I Die Tonight, which was the winner of the Edgar Award, as well as the Brenna Spector series, and She Was, which was the winner of the Shamus Award, as well as Into the Dark and Stay With Me. Nominated for the Edgar 4 times, she has also been a finalist for numerous other awards, including the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, the Strand Book Award, and the ITW Thriller, Macavity and Anthony Awards. And she lives with her husband in Woodstock, New York. So, folks, all those watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Alison for joining us here tonight. Alison, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, it is great for you to be here. We are thrilled for you to be here. So you are on your book tour for your latest thriller, We Are Watching. Could you take a minute or two and give us a brief synopsis of the book?
So basically, We Are Watching is kind of one of my worst nightmares. What would happen if a normal family were targeted by a group of online conspiracy theorists? The main character in the book is, well, there are actually 3 main characters, but in the very first chapter, Meg Russo and her husband Justin are driving their daughter Lily to college. It's a very exciting and wonderful time for them until they are pursued by a car full of kind of menacing skinheads, and an accident ensues with tragic consequences. And from there, Meg starts to realize that that might not have just been an accident, and that this group has been following her family, including her father, who is a reclusive former progressive rock star, for years, based on this very strange belief system that they've developed surrounding them. So that's what it's about. I consider it my scariest book, and I like to write scary books. So that's basically it.
So, Alison, I finished the book last night and I loved it. Okay. So, what was you referenced how, this was sort of, your worst nightmare, so to speak. What was the inspiration? Why did you want to write this book at this time?
Well, I started writing this a couple of years ago. I was fascinated by, I've always kind of been fascinated by conspiracy theories, but the one that really sort of got to me was Pizzagate, which happened in 2016, where this very normal guy who owned a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., found himself subject to these insane rumors and talk online about all of these, Democratic politicians running a pedophile ring out of his pizza shop. And it culminated in somebody bursting in there with a gun looking for this supposed secret chamber with supposed, trafficked children. And it was completely untrue. And I've always been fascinated by these stories and how they spread, and how the internet can act as an accelerant for them. I mean, these type of stories, these urban legends, these strange stories have been going on for years. Since I was a kid, there were always stories about this and that rock musician who worshiped the devil, or this movie star who was involved in some strange, conspiracy. But in recent years, it's accelerated to the point where there can go from being like 10 people following some strange story to 100 to 1,000 just within days. And the potential for just incredible paranoia over that, but also the kind of the bullying that ensues as a result, to me is terrifying. And like I said, I like to write about the things that scare me. So that was kind of the inspiration.
What kind of research did you do into real life conspiracy theorists and how they behave in the real world?
Well, I've been reading up about conspiracy theorists for a long time just because it's something that fascinates me. So, dating all the way back to, well, I mean, conspiracy theories date all the way back to the Salem witch trials and before that. But the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s, where, certain, again, normal people, people who ran daycares were targeted by these groups of people. So I read up about the McMartin preschool case in Southern California. That was really inspiring to me, which I remember that from when I was young and growing up out there, that everybody thought that these people running this school, this daycare, were all involved in like these strange, insane satanic rituals, and it was all completely fabricated. Their lives were destroyed by it. So I read up on that. I read up on more on Pizzagate, on QAnon. I went on to some of these websites like message boards like 4chan, 8chan, where QAnon took root and spread. And you can just see how quickly things like that take place. I mean, for me, it was a real eye opener because I'd never been on one of those message boards before. And, there's a lot of stuff on there that just makes your skin crawl. But it's what really makes your skin crawl is the amount of people just agreeing with it and building on it and making it even crazier and crazier as you go along and as you're reading these things.
It's a very minor spoiler. I feel like I have to ask you about it, given that I read the book. But in any of these real life conspiracy theories that you've researched, do the conspiracy theorists ever chop off their fingers, or is that just a Alison Gaylin creation?
That's just something I thought of. I mean, self-mutilation is scary, isn't it? It's strange. If somebody, I mean, it's just sort of a way of showing your devotion to something, to a belief system. That's, to me, that's kind of terrifying. So yeah, no, that was just my own warped imagination.
And so I think we're safe to go there since it's in the description of the book. But part of the reason that the conspiracy theorists, so essentially the conspiracy theorists think that your main characters are essentially tied to the apocalypse, the end of the world. And the reasons they think so, the primary reason is because your main character, Meg, who when she was 15 or so, entered some sort of writing contest and wrote a book. Can you tell us what the book was about and why you used it as the catalyst to create this whole conspiracy theory?
Well, it was built on in the book. The whole conspiracy theory was built on something that had been going on for years about Meg's father. Meg's father was a progressive rock musician in a band, kind of like maybe I don't know, Black Sabbath mixed with Yes, like one of these bands. And there were rumors about him in particular. In being a Satanist and putting satanic curses in one song in particular. So that had been going on for years. It's a generational thing, to the point of where, he and the family, he kind of quit the business, brought his family up to this small town in the Hudson Valley to raise their only daughter, Meg. And so when Meg was 15, she gained a little bit of fame. She was in the New York Times and everything for writing this book that won a contest that is called The Prophecy. What the conspiracy theorists sort of believed that had kind of carried over from this belief in what her father did was that the prophecy was instilled, both predicted and caused the end of the world. In the book, The Prophecy, there's a lot of references to a plague. People are wearing masks. There are a lot of references to the year of twos, which the followers see as 2022, which is the year the book takes place. Just things like that are highly coincidental, but when paired with this previous belief about the father putting satanic curses into his songs, is just sort of a perfect storm, a recipe for disaster. So it's just coincidence. She wrote a book. There are lots of books that have plagues in them. She wrote a book that had a plague in it that they thought predicted or caused COVID.
Right. And if you had read the book, you, I guess, would have died from COVID, if I remember correctly. And I was going to ask you about the grandfather next, so I asked those questions out of order. So I apologize.
Oh,
I
that's
thought
okay.
I did like I did like so the grandfather is essentially living off the grid, and I thought it was interesting the way he knew that something was wrong is because he got a check from Spotify or whatnot that was a lot larger than it normally is for his residuals or whatever the correct term is. And then it turns out that all these conspiracy theorists are listening to his music again, trying to, trying to find the curses, I guess, and listening to it backwards and whatnot. So I guess they couldn't quite figure it out though. But anyway, I really like was just fascinated by all this, and I could like absolutely see it happening. You also referenced Pizzagate, and in that, if I remember correctly, somebody stormed into a pizza shop in Washington D.C. and like wanted to go to the basement or something, saying that there was like some terrible things happening there to children, and the store didn't even have a basement. And I think
Yes.
we had something similar. So in this book, Meg doesn't have a pizza shop, but she has the next best thing. She has a bookshop. And can you talk briefly? And we don't want to go into too many spoilers, but I think some of this is superficial. We could probably talk about it. What are some of the scary things, the creepy things that start happening at her bookshop?
Well, early on in the book, a woman comes into the store and she keeps pounding on the wall in the bookstore and saying these really cryptic things and posting strange things on the Facebook page for the bookshop, which is reopening for the first time since Meg's husband died. And she just seems like some crazy person. And my best friend owns a bookstore here up in Woodstock, and bookstores are strange places because they're the most wonderful places in the world. But people, it's not like you're selling, shoes or something like that. Bookstores play directly to people's beliefs and ideologies, and people will get mad about, where you place your religion books versus whether they're in the front or the back, or whether you carry a certain book or whether you don't carry a certain book. And and especially now when people are talking about banning certain books, it's very, very personal owning a bookstore. So when this woman comes in, Meg thinks it's just another crazy person, or a zealot that would come into her bookstore. She remembers in the past, years ago, decades ago, there were a bunch of people who came in her bookstore protesting that she was selling Harry Potter books because they thought they were the work of the devil, or witches or the devil or whatever. So that's what she thinks it is at first, just the whole idea of her owning a bookstore. But then as it goes on, she realizes this might be something more personal, something more directed at her more than the store.
Something else that I touched upon that is super scary. Again, minor plot point. If I keep giving out minor plot points, that'll add up over time. So I am cognizant of that. But I also wanted to talk about the phenomenon of swatting. Can you briefly talk about, because that's another very scary thing. Can you briefly touch on that?
Yeah, I wrote about there's a swatting incident, and that's something that has, when I was writing the book, it was happening in my area fairly often. I mean, I don't know how often, but there were a lot of stories making the news where people would call the police, the SWAT team on certain people, saying there was some kind of altercation or somebody had a gun, or somebody was threatening somebody else when they weren't. And so people's homes or places of business would be swarmed upon by a SWAT team, by a huge amount of police, which is a terrifying occurrence. And then when that happens, I mean, if you make the wrong move, if you protest, everybody's nerves are at, fever pitch, and something awful could happen. Somebody could get killed in a situation like that. And I don't think it was too much of a coincidence that, it was at the same time as a lot of these conspiracy theories were taking root, and, everybody was polarized and everybody was online quite a bit, that these swatting incidents happen. And I found them terrifying, the whole concept of them. So I did want to include something like that in the book.
Alison, I did want to ask you about uh, trusting the police. I think that was a theme, maybe not a theme, but that was something that I think was brought up several times. Where so they're in a small town with only I think four officers. There were points where Meg felt that maybe the lead investigator wasn't really taking her seriously, kind of brushing her off. You had a situation where they talked about, should we get the feds involved? The feds probably won't even believe us. They won't act fast enough. There was talk about, and then I think you just outright said at times, there are a lot of conspiracy theorists within, law enforcement agencies. Can you talk a bit about that? Sort of a distrust or mistrust of law enforcement when it comes to conspiracy theories?
Yeah, to me, when you're targeted like that in the first place, I there are a lot of instances. I mean, not to say, oh, all the police are involved with, but there are a lot of instances. Police forces in general are, can be understaffed. There have been instances where kids have, gotten bullied and into committing suicide, where the police really, because their hands are tied for whatever reason, haven't been able to get involved until it's too late. There's so much sort of bureaucracy within law enforcement that it's difficult. Like you read the Thriller where it's like the police are running and everybody's there and everything, but the fact is that you have to jump through a lot of hoops before you can get police officers involved in your case, or certainly before you get feds involved in your case. And if you say, I think these weird people are sending me weird notes, they can't really do anything unless there's an actual direct action against you. And in that case, it's too late. And in this book, there's a very limited time frame, which you'll see when you read it. The whole book just takes place over a couple of days by necessity. And so there just isn't enough time. And from what they've been discovering, it's not that, law enforcement is more likely to be involved in this conspiracy theory, but this family is discovering that there's nobody they can trust, not their closest friends, not the police, not anybody. Like, they don't know where anybody's been lurking. And the idea is that they've been around and watching them for years. This has been going on for years. And all of a sudden it's deadline time because of this one date. So this is when the discovery, sort of blooms for them. So yeah, you can't just like call the cops. You can't just,
Yeah.
it's like Rosemary's Baby. If you've ever read that book, seen the movie or read the book, she can't trust any of her doctors, like no one, you don't know. There's literally nobody that you can completely clear.
Yeah, I mean, by no means is it like an anti-police story or anything like
Yeah.
that. I mean, if anything, the conspiracy theorists were, we already referenced the swatting, like they were, if anything, they were using sort of the police, unfortunately, like to their advantage. There was another thing that is a spoiler that I won't get into where, the daughter gets pulled over and things happen. And so, yeah, it seems like the conspiracy theorists were using the police to their advantage, unfortunately. So I did want to ask you some fun question. So I noticed, and it was referenced a couple of times, that the book club pick for that month was a Barbara Kingsolver book.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, of all the authors in the world, why did you pick Barbara Kingsolver to be the book club author of the month in the bookstore?
Well, it's Demon Copperhead, which I have started reading it. My husband read it, he loved it. And it came out around the same time that the book takes place. So I wanted something that took place then, and also something where somebody who is involved in you probably can hear my dog barking.
Don't worry about it, Alison.
Okay. But where somebody who would be involved in a conspiracy theory, where you can just take the very surface level of the title of a book, which is based on David Copperfield by Dickens. They don't care. There's the word demon in the title of the book. Why is demon in the title? Do you know? So that was part of the reason. Plus, it's a wonderful book. So why wouldn't they pick that for their book club?
I'm going to generally hold audience questions to the end, but along those same lines, Carol wants to know. You mentioned that the daughter was going to be going. I think it's.
I'm just going to close my door. 1 second.
Yeah, sure, no worries.
Just try to drown out the barking just a little bit.
It's okay. So you mentioned that Lily is going to Ithaca. Why?
Yeah.
Of all the colleges and universities in the country, Carol wants to know why Ithaca.
Well, Ithaca has an excellent music department, as it turns out. And for somebody living in the Hudson Valley who with a daughter who's a music prodigy, that would be a really ideal place to go. Cornell is near there as well, and that's a great school. Obviously, it's Cornell. But if you're really looking at places with like top flight music departments that are within New York State, and affordable for these people, Ithaca would be it.
So, in your research into real life conspiracy theorists, there are a lot of these doomsday conspiracies where, at a certain day, the world will end. What happens to these folks when you get to the day and the world doesn't end? How do they react to that? How do they explain that? How do they rationalize that?
Well, it's interesting. I think during QAnon, this just hit me so hard. This had been going on for so long that there was going to be a mass military tribunal and all of these, alleged people within the government that were running this satanic pedophile ring and sacrificing babies, whatever the heck they said they were doing. They would all be brought to justice during the first Trump administration. And then the first Trump administration came and went. And Q posted something like, well, we should just, time to move on, everybody. Let's just treasure the friendships we've made. And I found that just so ironic after everything, after all the people that were falsely accused of these. It's just so funny to me. Like it was like some sort of camp meeting or, camp. It was like summer camp. Let's treasure the friendships we've made and as part of this conspiracy theory. So I don't know. I think with a lot of conspiracy theories, when the deadline comes and goes, just sort of like these doomsday cults and everything, I think people are maybe disheartened. They take a step back. They start to see, wow, maybe I wasn't clued in as to this great truth of the world that nobody else is clued into. That's depressing. That's awful. And then it starts to build again. Well, maybe we just got the date wrong. Maybe there's just like some slight thing that we can kind of change a little bit, So I think it's human nature to really, everybody wants to be right. Everybody wants to be special. Everybody wants to be clued in on something that can make sense out of the chaos we live in, which is what a lot of conspiracy theory is. It's like writing, it's like what I do. It's like writing fiction. That's why one of the reasons why I write fiction. I like to instill some sense of order on a very chaotic world. I like a story with a beginning, middle, and an end. And that's what a lot of conspiracy theories are. And, they make you feel special. When you find out that it's wrong, then I feel like you either maybe leap to another one or you reform your initial one to become something else. So Pizzagate becomes QAnon, becomes something else. Satanic Panic becomes, Pizzagate. It's been going on for centuries.
Well, speaking of conspiracy theories, Alison, just this afternoon, President Trump announced that tomorrow he'll be declassifying 80,000 files related to the JFK assassination. And that got me thinking, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are in like popular mainstream culture here in America. I'm curious, as somebody who just wrote a book about the dangers of conspiracy theories, do you yourself believe in what one might consider a conspiracy theory. Are there any conspiracy theories out there that you subscribe to?
Well, there's some I could get on board with. I think the ones like, I mean, like Area 51. I think I don't think it's too far-fetched to believe that, there are aliens and that, one of them might have crash landed here at one point. I don't think that's that crazy. And the Kennedy assassination too. I mean, I think people were so traumatized by that and they wanted to think, how could that have just been this one? How could one person have done that? There has to be something else. There has to be more power behind that person for that to happen. So that, I mean, I think there's a comfort in believing in conspiracy theories as far as the Kennedy assassination goes. And it'll be interesting to see these papers to just think, wow, a random act like that where the president could get shot at a public appearance, you know, and just brutally killed by just some random person. That's horrifying. So I understand. I mean, I could get on board with some conspiracy theory regarding that because it would be comforting.
I think one of the things I liked most about your book was the relationships. So we had the relationship, we had not. I kind of thought it was going to be a love triangle. It didn't quite go in that direction, but we had the daughter and the two boys in her life, the one that works at the bookstore and the one who's a fellow musician. So we had that whole sort of thing going on, and the two boys didn't like each other from a incident at a camp a few years prior. And then, of course, we had, most importantly, we had the relationship between the daughter and the mother. We had the relationship between the mother and her father. We had the relationship between the wife and her. Unfortunately, we didn't get too much into it before he passed, but the wife and the husband. I really liked the way that you told those stories. I think I was most interested in I know like I'm probably being confusing here, but I liked the main character, the mother and her father. I think I liked that relationship the most. Can you speak to any of those relationships, and which relationship did you like the most, Alison?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I try to make these relationships as believable as possible because I mean, let's face it, the book is kind of bonkers, right? And I write kind of bonkers books. Like I mentioned, I like scaring people. I like envisioning situations that are, a little over the top. And in order for people to buy those things, in order for people to get emotionally invested themselves, you have to write characters they can relate to. And people always say write likable characters. And to me, the only unlikable character is one who's perfect, who's flawless, who has a perfect relationship with somebody else, who never experiences any sort of annoyance with any member of their family, right? So Meg and her father, I mean, to be an adult child of somebody who um, I mean, Meg adored her mother, and her mother died when she was, a teenager, and her father is a creative type and seemingly very self-absorbed and in Meg's opinion, very paranoid and a believer of conspiracy theory himself. That's how she sees him. She thinks he lives on another planet. We all misunderstand our parents and our children in so many ways. He misunderstands her, she misunderstands him. They don't give each other enough credit for knowing what's going on in the world. And I feel like their arc was really interesting for me to write because, you know, they kind of find their way towards understanding each other. And the same with Lily and Meg. They're very different people. Lily is more like Meg's father in a way, being a musician and being, in a different headspace than Meg is. And she spends a lot of time trying to understand both of them. And I'm hoping that I like to think that by the book's end, she understands and appreciates and loves her father, and same with her daughter.
And then one of the other things I liked about your book is, it was pretty clear that there was someone or someones, um, close to these characters that were involved in the conspiracy theory, working with those group of people, and it was just kind of interesting trying to predict who that person or who those people were going to be. And you
Mhm.
had, and again, this is where I got to keep my mouth shut, but you had a lot of red herrings. You had a lot of different possibilities. You had family and friends and friends of the family and acquaintances and people, colleagues, and people within sort of each of the three characters' orbits there. And I just, it was a lot of fun trying to predict where you were going to go with the book. And I'll stop there and not say any more to spoil. But I guess one of my questions would be, what to you makes a good thriller? How do you have it so that you keep your audience on their toes, you give them the twists and the turns, but those twists and turns aren't like out of left field. They have to be like you don't want to see it coming, but then you want to look back and say, yeah, that does make sense. Can you speak to that, like that line between,
Yeah.
you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, to me it's more important for a twist or a surprise to be earned rather than for it to be totally surprising. Like I get so annoyed if I read a book and there's this giant twist, but it's like, yeah, I didn't figure it out because it just it's completely came out of left field. I'd rather have people figure it out and have it be earned. So in this book, I mean, to me, like when I look at things that scare me, you know, it's it's the part that we can relate to. So in my book, I feel like just the idea that the people that you've known for years, you don't know which one to trust. Like you have no, I wanted to sort of create that atmosphere of paranoia for the reader as well, which is why, other than I have the posts of the person who kind of runs this message board about this conspiracy theory, those are just posts. I don't go into the heads of anybody else because I want the reader to be kind of looking over their shoulder too. And the whole idea that this has been going on for years and that some of the reasons why your friends might be in your town might be because they wanted to get close to you and figure, you don't know. So I don't know. To me, it was fun to write scenes where Meg got it wrong, where she suspected somebody and attacked them and comes off as a complete, delusional person for saying this. It's like I think the whole idea of being targeted by a group like this is, to me, the thing that's the scariest about it is the way it messes with your mind, the way it takes away your ability to trust, the way it makes you not believe in any of your relationships at all because you don't know which one is real and which isn't. So I hope that answered the question, but that's what I was
Yeah,
aiming
no,
for.
yeah, and I think you accomplished that for sure.
Thank you.
So, folks, if you have any questions for Alison, we'll get to them in about 10 minutes, so you can get them into the Q&A or into the chat. I will look in both places. Yeah, so let's just take a sort of a step back. And Alison, let's just talk more generally. I fear, Alison, I'm going to spoil the book if I keep going on my line of questioning. So let me pull
Everybody
myself back.
forget everything that's been said.
Let me pull myself back a little bit. So,
Mm.
Alison, give us your writing origin story. How did you get involved? How did you first start out in writing?
Well, I've wanted to write ever since I was young. I'm an only child, and I was, a weird little only child when I was growing up, and I just like to write stories to sort of entertain myself, and I would always do extra credit for English. And, I was just always wanting to tell stories. It's just was always a drive. And then when I was in high school, I had an English teacher and she gave me a B in English, and I was so upset. And I went and I asked her why, and she said, "Well, I only give A's to people who will one day write professionally." And that devastated me. So I kind of gave that up, and I studied theater in college actually. But I kept the urge to write was always there, and I went to Northwestern. I was studying acting there, but what I really was fascinated by was playwriting, and I got into the playwriting program, and the woman who ran it, Linda Jenkins, was just so wonderful, and just the idea of writing plays and creating these characters. So then I got out of school, and then I started, I became an entertainment journalist. I went to graduate school in journalism because I wanted to, make a living. Journalism, making a living, who knows? But anyway, I did that. But at the same time, I was always doing fiction writing workshops. And I took a fiction writing workshop in New York, and I got very close to the people there, and it was a great experience. And I wrote a short story that I turned into a novel that eventually became the first novel I published, but it took like 10 years. I wrote this novel, and my husband's cousin was an assistant to an agent, and he sent it around, and I got a lot of really, really, really nice rejection letters. But all of them sort of, said the same thing, which was that I'd made these interesting characters, but the plot wasn't there. So I read a lot of, it turned out to be a mystery, so I read a lot of mysteries. And I did a page one rewrite. It basically took 5 years, and I wrote a whole other book. And I got an agent that I wasn't related to, and that remains my agent to this day, Deborah Schneider. She's great. And she sold my first book, which was Hide Your Eyes. And that came out 20 years ago in 2005. And I've been writing crime fiction, suspense, mystery ever since. And I love it. So that's how I started.
So, Allison, I noticed that, so I was looking at all the books first of all, you've won so many awards. You've been a finalist for so many awards. It's quite astounding. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so I noticed that it seems like initially in your early writing career, it seems like you were writing series. So you had Samantha Leifer.
Leifer. That was like such a stupid character name because you could pronounce it like 3 different ways, but it's
Yeah,
Leifer.
and I'll pronounce them all 3 different ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Simone Glass, and then Brenna Spector, which I think is the big one, and then really you've left those behind for the most part, and now you're doing standalones. It seems. Can you talk about the pros and cons of writing series versus writing standalones?
Yeah, well, my series are so short, so that my Samantha Leifer series is only 2 books. My Brenna Spector series is 3 books, and Simone Glass was just 1 book. That wasn't really a series. But I, and now the other thing I do is Robert B. Parker writes series. I write the Legacy series, Sunny Randall, which is a character that's been around for so many books. So
That's
I
not in
do
your
that.
bio, Allison. I didn't know that.
Oh no, surprise. Yeah, I do that. I've written 2. I'm working on my 3rd one now. But the thing with a series is that the pros of it are you have so much time to develop your characters, and you have this, you sort of know your characters and where you're going, and there's a safety in that, and a familiarity in that, and that's kind of fun. The Brenna Spector series is about a private investigator that has perfect autobiographical memory. So writing a series about somebody with perfect autobiographical memory is like just not, that's very difficult when you don't have perfect autobiographical memory yourself. You have to go over things. Standalones, I find a little more exciting to write because you can go anywhere with them. You can kill off all your characters if you want to. You can make the most crazy plots. You don't have to make everybody necessarily redeemable. I feel like it's a little more the sky's the limit. So I find it a little more exciting, although I do enjoy writing series too. So I'm sorry about to spring the Robert Parker one on you, but yeah, I've written two of those, and that's in a way like the best type of series because this brilliant writer created these great characters, and it's like giving me an amazing toolbox to build a table with. It's going to be a great table.
So, Alison, I also noticed that your previous standalone, your one most recent to this book, The Collective, was optioned into a TV series. I think it was going to be a UK TV series. I'm not sure if that ever has taken off yet or not, but it did.
Yeah, what happened was Yellowbird was the company that optioned it, and the Yellowbird UK folded, and then it was optioned by another company that is now developing it into a TV series. So we'll see what happens,
That's exciting, Alison.
Crossing fingers and everything and hoping for the best. Yeah.
And I noticed Harlan Coben, when I think of television books adapted into TV series, I think of Harlan Coben. And then I just watched like the best UK TV show I've ever watched. I guess it wasn't a TV show per se; it was more of a mini series. But Adolescence. If you haven't checked
oh my
that
God,
out,
I just watched that.
Oh my goodness! So
wow.
Anyway, the reason I bring all this up though is if we are watching was made into a movie or a TV series, who would you want to play Meg?
And, that's a great question. I love those questions. And there has been some interest in We Are Watching as well, which I'm crossing fingers on. I don't know. There are always these, I love an actress like Toni Collette. I love her. Or we're just like dreaming like Kate Blanchett. There's so many wonderful actresses out there that can play these complicated characters that just would be a dream to like be able to bring out all the sort of the nuances that you hoped you could get across. But yeah, there quite a few. I know that when The Collective got optioned, I was thinking, they were throwing all these names at me, and I was like, oh, it's so exciting. So yeah, it's always fun to daydream about.
Sure. So we have an audience question from an anonymous attendee. It's a great question I usually ask. What is your writing process? Do you outline with plot twists, red herrings, or do you make up the story as you go along? So are you a plotter or are you a pantser, Alison?
Plotter or pantser? It's kind of a combination. When I first started, I had these very detailed outlines, but I never stuck to them. So it was just sort of. So what I do is I sort of think about where I want it to end up. And while I'm writing it, I maybe kind of do a very loose little outline for like the next 2 chapters. But then from there, but that always ends up changing too. I would say that I'm more of a pantser. That said, my first draft is always horrible, awful, like terrible. So my first draft's almost like the outline. I turn that in to my poor editor and agent, and I feel sorry for them for having to read it. And then when I'm doing the rewriting process, that's when I'm able to sort of get my pacing in and everything else, and get rid of scenes that don't work and add in explanation and stuff like that. So I would say I'm more of a pantser, but it leads to a terrible first draft.
I like that, so do you typically write in third person? Because I liked that for this book. And I'll say that because like I think it added to it was more unpredictability where, and I also liked, that we were getting it from obviously Meg's perspective, but then her daughter's perspective, and then the father, the grandfather's perspective, the fact that like you would leave off, you would end each chapter kind of usually on a cliffhanger, and then we go to the next chapter and we'd be seeing it from a different character's perspective. But
Yes.
it was always in third person, which to me, I'm like, are they going to really kill off characters that are in first person? That would seem odd to me. And so the fact that you kept it all third person, and then just the way you told it from the different points of view, I thought was interesting. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've done both first person and third person. I've done present tense and past tense. It's like it's all these decisions. Like it's like if you get stressed out by making decisions, writing is the most stressful thing possible because all it is one decision after the next. But I always think about, okay, who is this book about? What is this book about? And so the collective, that was really about one woman who feels very isolated because she's still getting over the murder of her daughter. And so I decided there weren't any other points of view I needed other than hers. With this book, it's about a family that is targeted by conspiracy theorists. And so I felt like I needed the voices of these three members of the family in order to tell this story. So I did make the decision to tell it from these three points of view. I think there was a little while at the beginning that I wasn't sure whether I wanted chapters from Nathan, the father's point of view, but pretty early on into it, I decided that he would definitely add to the story, and that there wasn't really a way I could tell the story without having his point of view in there. So that's really what it is. It's all the desire to tell the best story that you can. And then it becomes a question of, okay, what tools am I going to use to do that? What tense am I going to tell it in? What person am I going to tell it in? When am I going to set it? Where am I going to, everything else, it's all in the service of the story. So that's why I did that.
Wondering, Allison, obviously we can't talk about our alternative endings because we're going to spoil some things, but was there anything in the final draft that significantly changed from your first draft? Was the daughter originally a son? Was the grandfather originally the grandmother? Was can you let us in on any changes you've made, any significant
Yes,
changes you made throughout the draft, the revising period?
this is a really excellent question because my very first draft, which I wrote maybe like I think 2 years ago, there is nothing the same from that draft other than Meg and Lily's names. There was no Nathan. She wasn't a bookstore owner. She was an actress. Lily was 12 years old. It was terrible. It was just terrible. It was just so terrible. All I wanted to do was tell a story about a family being targeted by conspiracy theorists, and I just went totally the wrong direction. So yeah, it was different, completely different. But yeah, so and then it became the idea of like, okay, I'm going to step back from this. This is the story I want to tell. These characters are not nor I want normal characters leading normal lives. What are they going to be doing? How are they going to be doing? And so that's what I did. Yeah, but it really changed completely.
Oh, interesting. So
Mhm.
Jody has a question back on your origin story. She wants to know how long did it take for writing to become financially rewarding for you? At what point were you able to start doing it full time, Allison?
Well, okay, so I mean, not very long ago. I mean, I've gotten pretty good, deals from publishers, but when you've got a family and a mortgage and all that stuff, it only goes so far. So I had a day job working in entertainment magazines until I started writing these Parker books in addition to my own books. So that was really, I'm trying to think of when I maybe 2018, 19, 20, around there was when I was able to quit my day job of working for magazines and just devoting myself full time to fiction writing. So, it took about 15 years of being a published author. I published my first book in 2025, and then probably around 2020 was when I started. God, maybe even after that was when I got the Parker books and I was able to write full time.
And congratulations on getting those Parker books. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
And that
I'm
leads.
sorry it wasn't in my bio.
No, that's okay. But that leads me to my next question. And you touched on it briefly earlier. But Alison, as we start to wind the conversation down, we only have a few minutes remaining. Alison, what are you up to now? What's next for Alison?
I am currently in the process of writing my next Robert Parker book. It's called Booked. Sunny Randall, the private investigator, is hired by a writer that Parker readers probably know. Her name is Melanie Joan Hall, and she's a real diva of a very famous writer. And she wants her to track down this person who gave her a 1-star review and on an anonymous Goodreads type site, and it leads to mayhem.
Well, Alison, you'll have to come back for that one because so we hosted Chris Farnsworth last month, and he just took over for the Jesse Stone series. And then and then a couple years ago, we hosted Ace Atkins, and he, I think, had at that point taken over for Spencer.
Yes,
series.
I love Ace. He's a friend of mine, and Christopher Farnsworth and I have been in recent contact because we were trying to coordinate. Our characters used to date, but they are not dating now, and we just have to like kind of check in every so often. But yeah, it's they're really. I'm honored to be among such a nice and wonderful bunch of people.
Yeah. So Alison, I don't I'm typically not the one doing the interviews. Oftentimes we have another best-selling author acting as the conversation partner. But I knew I was going to enjoy your book, so I said I'm going to be the conversation partner tonight. But I say all that to say that, was there anything I should have asked you that I didn't, or any topic or subject you wanted me to ask about that I didn't? Now's the time to. Yeah.
No, Robert, this was wonderful. I'm really glad that I got to be interviewed by you.
Great. And Alison, where can folks learn more about you? Do you have a website? Are you on? Alison, this is relevant to your book. Are you on any social media platforms?
Well, I'm on 4chan. No, I'm just kidding.
Any message boards? And you have a newsletter. Where would you like people to find you?
Okay, so I have a website. It's www.alisongaylin.com. I'm also on Instagram, alison.gaylin. And I have a Blue Sky account. I'm on Blue Sky, Alison Gaylin. And then I have an author and a regular me page on Facebook.
Yeah, great. Excellent. So, folks, let's give Alison a big virtual round of applause for a great job tonight. Whether it's at your local independent bookstore or even your library, go out and read We Are Watching. It's been out for a couple of weeks. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great edge-of-your-seat thriller. You can read it in 1 or 2 sittings. You'll get really sucked into it, I promise. It was definitely one of the better thrillers I've read in a while. And I also, for those who live locally, I would highly recommend Wellesley Books, our official bookstore partner, and they will obviously ship books anywhere in the continental United States as well. So with all that said, for those watching live, please fill out the feedback survey when you exit and look for the follow-up email tonight with the recording and information about some other upcoming virtual author visits. We have some really good ones coming up over the next 3 weeks. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. Thanks again, Alison.
Thank you, Robert.
Bye-bye.